The Zelthar Dominion was one of the oldest empires in the known galaxy. For over 10,000 years, their banners had flown above countless conquered worlds. Their fleets filled the skies wherever they went, and their soldiers marched with pride. To them, war was not a matter of survival. It was a tradition, a way to remind others who ruled the stars. When the small blue planet called Earth was discovered on the edge of the Orion Arm, the Dominion's council barely paid attention. The species living there, humans, were considered young, emotional, and far from dangerous. Reports described them as intelligent but undisciplined, creative yet chaotic. Some within the Dominion even laughed when they saw recordings of human entertainment and art. "They are loud," one advisor said. "They are impulsive," said another. "They will kneel quickly," said Commander Var, the one chosen to lead the skirmish. The Dominion called it a routine skirmish operation. It was not meant to be a real war. Just a simple action to test Earth's defenses, steal a few samples, and remind the galaxy that no new species could rise without the Dominion's permission. Commander Var's fleet consisted of 3 massive battlecruisers, each the size of a human city. They were built with thick armor, glowing blue engines, and weapons that could split asteroids. His crew, trained for years, expected no resistance. The humans had only a few space stations and small defense ships. It would be quick and easy. Or so they thought. When the Zelthar ships entered the solar system, they cloaked their presence. Earth's satellites and scanners could not detect them until it was too late. From high orbit, Var observed the planet through the viewing deck, oceans glittering, continents glowing with light, storms twisting across the atmosphere. "A beautiful world," his second officer said softly. Var nodded. "A pity it will have to burn." The order was given. Energy beams struck 2 of Earth's orbital defense stations. They exploded instantly, sending debris floating into space. The Zelthar soldiers cheered. It was another display of power. But then something unexpected happened. Instead of panicking, the humans reacted with speed. Small ships, rough metal and clearly outdated, launched from Earth's orbit. They were nothing compared to the sleek Dominion fighters, but they moved with fierce purpose. Within minutes, the human ships opened fire. Not retreating, but charging directly toward the cruisers. "What are they doing?" the officer asked in confusion. "Attacking us," Var replied with disbelief. The humans were reckless. Their weapons barely scratched the Zelthar shields, yet they didn't stop. When one of their ships was hit, another moved in to protect it. When communication lines went down, they used backup systems or even manual signals. They fought as if they refused to die quietly. After several minutes of battle, Var grew irritated. "Destroy them," he ordered. "End this farce." Massive energy cannons fired. A human ship exploded in a flash of light, then another, then another. One of the human vessels, a transport ship named Hope's Horizon, and was struck directly. It broke apart, scattering pieces into the void. Thousands of civilians on board were lost instantly. The Zelthar officers clapped and celebrated. To them it was another victory in an endless list of conquests. But before they could continue, a signal came through the comms. It was a human broadcast. Static filled the bridge, followed by a voice. Calm but cold. "This is Commander Elias Ward of the Terran Defense Fleet," the voice said. "You attacked a civilian ship. You killed families and children. You call this a skirmish. We call it something else." There was a pause. The human's tone grew sharper. "This isn't war yet," he said. "This is retribution." The transmission ended. For a moment, the entire bridge fell silent. The words hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. Var didn't understand. Retribution? To him, it sounded like an emotional outburst, meaningless. But deep inside, something unsettled him. The voice carried a weight that he couldn't ignore. He brushed off the feeling and ordered the fleet to continue. "Proceed to Phase 2, he said. "Destroy their command satellites. Let them know resistance is useless." The battle raged on for hours. Human ships were outnumbered, yet they fought in small, coordinated teams. Some of them sacrificed themselves to protect others. When fuel ran low, they still refused to retreat. The Dominion weapons were superior, but the human pilots made up for it with determination and unpredictable moves. They didn't fight like soldiers. They fought like people protecting everything they loved. From his ship's bridge, Var watched as one damaged human vessel rammed directly into a Dominion cruiser. The explosion tore through both ships, sending flames into space. Even the crew of the Dominion fell silent, watching in disbelief. "What kind of species throws themselves into certain death?" one officer whispered. "The desperate," another said. Var stared at the wreckage. "Or the dangerous," he muttered. By the time the Dominion fleet withdrew to recharge, they had lost one cruiser and hundreds of smaller craft. Technically, it was still a victory, but it didn't feel like one. The human resistance had been too fierce, too organized. Later, as Var reviewed the battle data, he noticed something strange. Human transmissions across their networks were filled with one repeating phrase: "For the fallen." It was not a command or strategy. It was a vow. The Dominion believed that fear would crush humanity. Instead, it united them. Every loss made them stronger. Every destroyed ship became a reason to rebuild faster. Back on Earth, Commander Elias Ward stood in the Terran Defense Command Center, watching the stars through reinforced glass. Behind him, technicians worked day and night. He knew they couldn't win a direct war now, but he also knew something else. Humans never stayed down for long. His deputy, Captain Mira Solis, walked up beside him. "They'll come back," she said quietly. "Yes," Elias replied. "And when they do, we'll be ready." She looked at him curiously. "You really think we can fight them?" "They have thousands of ships." Elias smiled faintly. "They think numbers win wars. They're wrong. Heart wins wars." He turned to the large screen showing the Dominion's retreating ships. "They wanted to teach us fear," he said. "They just taught us unity." Across the planet, the news spread fast. Humanity had faced its first interstellar attack and survived. Governments that once argued over borders now met as allies. Scientists shared technology freely. Engineers redesigned engines, weapons, and shields. Even ordinary citizens volunteered to help in any way they could. Humanity had always been known for creativity, but now it was driven by something greater: vengeance for the innocent and hope for the future. In distant space, the Zelthar Dominion fleet prepared their next move. They called it another operation. Commander Var believed he would crush human resistance completely this time, but in the back of his mind, he still remembered that voice, calm, unshaken, promising retribution. For the first time in his long military career, he felt something unfamiliar: doubt. He stood before the viewing window watching Earth shrink into the distance. "Primitive creatures," he muttered. "They will break." Yet deep inside, he wondered if perhaps this time the Dominion had awakened something it could not control. Something human. Something relentless. Something that would change the galaxy forever. The attack on Earth was over, but its memory burned like fire across every human mind. What the Zelthar Dominion had called a routine skirmish became the spark that united billions. The world that had once been divided by nations, languages, and politics began to move as one. The loss of the colony's ship Hope's Horizon became a symbol, a reminder of how fragile life was and how precious unity could be. Every news channel replayed the same short message from Commander Elias Ward. "They call it a skirmish. We call it retribution." Those 6 words spread across the solar system faster than any fleet could travel. People painted them on walls, wrote them on banners, and whispered them in homes and factories. It was no longer just about revenge. It was about standing up for what humanity truly was: resilient, fearless, and unwilling to bow. The global awakening within days. Every government on Earth signed the Sol Accord, a single agreement that ended centuries of separation. Old flags were lowered and a new one was raised: the blue and silver banner of the Terran Coalition. It was not an empire, not a single ruler, but a promise between worlds. Factories once used for trade now turned into shipyards. Energy plants powered new construction sites. The first massive war project began: the Aegis program, designed to build humanity's first generation of true space warships. Scientists worked day and night. Engineers slept in their labs. Old rivals, nations that once distrusted each other, shared designs and blueprints without hesitation. It wasn't about pride anymore. It was about survival. In the heart of Luna Base, Commander Elias Ward stood before the new Terran Defense Council. Around the table were leaders from Earth, Mars, and the colonies of Titan and Europa. Holograms flickered, showing reports of the Dominion's fleet movements. "The Zelthar underestimated us once," Elias said, his voice calm but firm. They won't make that mistake again. When they return, they will come in full force. We must be ready before that day. Dr. Sora Min, the chief scientist from Mars, adjusted her glasses and nodded. We've already started reverse engineering their wreckage. Their technology is advanced, but not magic. Their power sources are efficient, but we can adapt faster. Her assistant added, Human engineers are good at fixing things, but they're even better at improving them. Everyone in the room smiled slightly. That was true. Humans had always been quick learners, turning even tragedy into opportunity. The spirit of unity across Earth's continents. People worked together in ways unseen in history. Farmers supplied soldiers with food. Students volunteered in communication centers. Retired pilots trained the next generation. In one shipyard near the Pacific Ocean, a group of engineers stood beside the frame of a new vessel. They called it the TNS Valiant, the first warship built entirely by united humanity. It was made from the remains of fallen satellites and pieces of destroyed defense stations. Rebuilt, reforged, reborn. A young engineer named Aiden looked up at the rising ship and said quietly, They thought we'd fall apart. They didn't know what happens when humans lose something precious. His friend Maya smiled. Yeah, we build something stronger. In orbit, the first Aegis-class ships began to take shape, large, armored, and equipped with hybrid technology. Humans didn't just copy Zelthar designs, they modified them, made them simpler, faster, and more reliable. Where the Dominion valued perfection, humans valued adaptability. Even the soldiers trained differently. Instead of relying on one method, they learned to mix strategies. Old human tactics from Earth's wars combined with new zero-gravity combat styles. They used creativity as their greatest weapon. The Dominion's arrogance far away in the grand halls of the Zelthar Dominion, Commander Var reported his victory to the High Council. The meeting chamber glowed with silver light as alien nobles listened to his words. The humans resisted, yes, Var admitted, his voice calm. But their technology is primitive. Their losses were severe. They pose no real threat. The counselors murmured among themselves. One of them, Elder Tharn, raised his ridged brow. And yet your fleet returned damaged. You lost a cruiser, Var stiffened. An unfortunate accident. One of their ships rammed us deliberately. It was irrational, another counselor laughed. Rational or not, it worked, didn't it? The room grew quiet. Var didn't reply. The council finally dismissed him, calling the operation a success. They would allow him to rest and prepare for another minor campaign later. But as Var left the hall, his thoughts were uneasy. He had seen the human transmissions. He had heard that voice, Commander Elias Ward's voice, calm, unbroken, full of something that could not be measured by rank or weapons. He replayed the message in his mind. This isn't war yet. This is retribution. He didn't understand it then, but the more he thought about it, the more it troubled him. Retribution wasn't just anger. It was justice mixed with purpose. The builders of hope back on Earth, hope became the strongest metal. New cities were built on the Moon and Mars to support the war effort. The colonies that once struggled now thrived. Humanity had never worked this fast before. Children in schools learned about stars, engineering, and teamwork instead of just history. Songs were written about courage. Even small gestures mattered. A letter sent to a soldier, a candle lit for those lost in battle. Commander Elias Ward traveled between colonies, giving speeches that lifted hearts and strengthened resolve. He never shouted or demanded. He simply reminded people what they were fighting for. During one of his visits to Mars Command, a reporter asked him, "Commander, do you really believe humans can win against such a powerful empire?" Elias smiled gently. "Winning is not the goal," he said. "Surviving with honor is. But if they force our hand, they'll learn what it means when humanity stands together." Those words spread just like his first message. Across every colony, humans repeated them like a prayer. The shadow of war. By the third month after the attack, the Terran coalition had completed 10 Aegis-class ships and hundreds of new starfighters. The human fleet was still small compared to the Dominions, but its pilots were bold, and its commanders creative. Intelligence reports began to show that the Zelthar were watching, observing Earth's rebuilding efforts from afar. No new attacks came, but strange signals were detected at the edge of the solar system. At Luna Base, Commander Elias stood in the war room studying the signals. His officers watched as red dots blinked on the holographic map. "They're coming back," Captain Mira said softly. Ilias nodded. "Yes, and this time they won't find a planet unprepared." He looked at the faces around him, young, determined, and ready. When they arrive, they'll see what unity looks like. A message across the stars. Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, Var's ship drifted in deep space, awaiting new orders. The Dominion High Command had grown distracted by internal rivalries. Some thought humanity wasn't worth their time. Others wanted to conquer Earth completely to make an example. Var requested a delay, claiming repairs were not complete. In truth, he wanted to learn more about the humans. He ordered his crew to intercept human broadcasts secretly. Day after day, they listened. They heard songs, speeches, laughter, and even recordings of children talking about the brave pilots in space. The crew felt uneasy. "They sound strange," one said. "They mourn and laugh in the same breath." Var replied quietly, "They are not like us. That may be their greatest strength." The human promise. By the 6th month, the Terran coalition declared its readiness. The fleet was still small, but morale was unshakable. Every ship carried the same message painted on its hull: "For the fallen." At dawn on Earth, Elias Ward stood at the launch platform watching the first full Terran fleet rise into orbit. He placed his hand on the railing and whispered softly, "We were tested. Now we answer." The crowd below cheered as the ships disappeared into the clouds. For the first time in human history, Earth was united not by fear, but by hope. And far away, the Zelthar Dominion, in all its pride, still thought of it as a small disturbance. A routine conflict, a minor issue they didn't understand. What they had started, they didn't know that. Every human heart now beat with a single purpose. They didn't realize that the next time they faced humanity, it wouldn't be a defense. It would be retribution. 6 months had passed since the Zelthar Dominion first attacked Earth. To them, the battle had been a small event, hardly worth remembering. But for humanity, it was the beginning of something far greater, the start of their unity and rise. During those 6 months, the Terran coalition had done what no one in the galaxy thought possible. They built a fleet from ruins. They turned broken metal into ships, sorrow into strength, and fear into determination. Commander Elias Ward, now Admiral Ward, stood in the command room aboard the TNS Valiant, the first flagship of the Terran fleet. Around him, officers worked with focus and quiet energy. The soft hum of engines filled the air, a sound that now symbolized hope. Before him on the screen was a holographic image of the Dominion border world HFY. It was a small industrial planet known for building weapons and ships for the Zelthar army. "This will be our first strike," Elias said calmly. A message not of revenge but of resolve. His second-in-command, Captain Mira Solis, nodded. "We strike their supply lines, their factories, and then disappear before they understand what happened." Elias smiled faintly. "Exactly. They taught us how to fight in space. Now we'll teach them how humans fight back." The plan: the Terran fleet consisted of 15 ships, a mix of Aegis-class destroyers, 2 carriers, and smaller escorts. Against the Dominion's vast armadas, it was nothing. But humans had something the Dominion never valued: creativity and adaptability. Each ship carried hybrid systems combining human design and captured Zelthar technology. Shields that recharged faster, engines that could make sudden, unpredictable jumps, and weapons that could overload Dominion armor. Every pilot, every soldier, and every engineer aboard those ships knew what they were risking. But not one hesitated. As the fleet moved into jump formation, Admiral Ward stood tall and gave a single order: "For the fallen." The words echoed through every ship, answered by 1,000 voices. Moments later, the Terran fleet disappeared into the stars, the first human offensive. The Dominion forces stationed at Vos Prime were relaxed. To them, this world was far from danger. They were repairing ships, trading supplies, and even celebrating minor victories. The humans, they believed, were still rebuilding and could not possibly reach this far into Dominion territory. Then, without warning, space itself seemed to rip apart. Blue flashes of light appeared across the sky as the Terran fleet arrived. Within seconds, human ships opened fire. Precision strikes hit communication towers, weapon depots, and fuel stations. Dominion pilots scrambled to respond, but the humans moved too fast. Their ships darted between defenses like shadows. "What is happening?" shouted a Dominion officer. "Who dares attack us?" "Unknown fleet," another replied. "Their design does not match any known enemy." In minutes, chaos spread across Vos Prime's orbit. From the TNS Valiant, Admiral Ward watched the battle unfold. "Target only military structures," he ordered. "We're not here to destroy worlds. We're here to send a message." The humans fought with calm precision. Where the Dominion used brute force, the Terrans used strategy. They used asteroids as cover, split into smaller groups, and attacked from unexpected directions. The Dominion's local fleet, 3 battle cruisers and a handful of smaller ships, quickly found themselves overwhelmed by the speed and unpredictability of the human assault. One Dominion cruiser turned to flee, but a human fighter squadron intercepted it. The fighters weaved between laser blasts and missile trails, firing with perfect coordination. Within seconds, the cruiser's engines exploded. To the Zelthar, it was unthinkable. A primitive species had just destroyed a Dominion warship. Fear spreads across the Dominion's communication networks. Urgent reports began to appear. Unknown fleet attacking Vos Prime. Technology matches human signatures. They are using our weapons against us. The Council on the homeworld dismissed it at first. Impossible, they said. Humans can't even reach that far. But when visual data arrived, showing human ships with the Terran insignia, disbelief turned to shock. Commander Var, who once led the first attack on Earth, watched the footage in silence. His officers waited for his reaction. "Admiral," one said carefully, "it seems the humans have learned quickly." Var's eyes narrowed. "No," he said quietly. "They've adapted. That's worse." He stood up and turned toward the stars. "Prepare the fleet. We'll end this before it grows," but he already knew it was too late. Something unstoppable had begun. The Battle of Vos Prime. On the battlefield, the Terran fleet continued its assault. Dominion reinforcements began to arrive, but the humans had already achieved their goal. Captain Mira's ship, the TNS Horizon, led a daring move, a close-range strike on the main Dominion shipyard. The Dominion commander laughed when he saw them approaching. "Foolish humans," he said. "They are charging to their own destruction." But Mira smiled. "Not destruction," she whispered. "Distraction." Her ship's attack drew the Dominion defenses away, allowing the TNS Valiant to slip through and plant magnetic charges along the shipyard's core structure. When the charges detonated, a wave of light spread across space. The entire facility collapsed in on itself, breaking into 1,000 fragments. For a few silent moments, even the Dominion ships stopped firing, stunned by what they saw. The humans didn't celebrate. They simply turned and jumped out of the system before reinforcements could trap them. When the smoke cleared, Vos Prime's orbit was filled with burning wreckage, not of human ships, but of Dominion ones. The message of Retribution hours later. Across Dominion territory, a single transmission played on every channel. It was short, simple, and impossible to trace. The holographic image showed Admiral Ward standing calmly in front of the Terran flag. "We do not seek conquest," he said. "We seek justice. You attacked us without warning. You called it a skirmish. This—" He paused as images of the destroyed shipyard appeared behind him. "Is retribution." Then the message ended. For the first time in centuries, the Zelthar Dominion felt something they had never known before: fear. The galaxy watches news of the human counterattack spread quickly across the stars. Neighboring species who once ignored Earth now watched in awe. The humans had done what no other young race had ever dared. They had struck back against the mighty Dominion and survived. On neutral worlds, traders whispered about the Retribution fleet. Some said the humans were fearless. Others said they were mad. But all agreed on one thing: humanity had changed the balance of power. Even among the Dominion's own citizens, doubt began to grow. If the humans could reach Vos Prime, what could stop them from reaching more worlds? The aftermath back aboard the TNS Valiant, the crew gathered in the main hall. They had won their first offensive, a small but powerful victory. Admiral Ward looked at them proudly. "We've shown them that humanity stands. But this is only the beginning. They will come back with greater force, and we must be ready." One young pilot raised his hand. "Sir, what if they bring everything they have?" Ward looked at him and said quietly, "Then we'll give them everything we are." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what he meant. Humanity didn't have the biggest ships or the oldest empire. But they had something no one else did: the will to fight for each other no matter the odds. Across the stars far away, in the depths of space, Commander Var stood on the bridge of his new flagship. The reports from Vos Prime played on repeat. He watched the human ships, fast, fearless, determined, and he finally understood what had been unleashed. He turned to his officers and said softly, "We thought them fragile, but they are the storm." No one replied. The hum of the engines filled the silence. Outside the viewing window, countless stars stretched into infinity. Somewhere among them, humans were already preparing for their next move. The Dominion had started the war. But now humanity had taken control of its direction, and as their fleet returned home, every human aboard knew one truth: the fight had just begun. They had defended their home. They had struck their enemy. Now they were ready for what came next. Retribution had begun, and it was far from over. The galaxy had always known the Zelthar Dominion as unstoppable. Their fleet stretched across countless star systems, their armies disciplined and their strategies perfected over millennia. But something was changing. The humans, once dismissed as insignificant, were no longer a minor annoyance. They were a storm rising at the edge of the Dominion's reach. The events at Vos Prime had shocked not only the Dominion but the galaxy itself. Messages of the Terran counterstrike traveled faster than any fleet could move. Everywhere, beings who had never considered humans as serious competitors were now watching with a mixture of awe and fear. The Dominion Reacts Commander Var sat in his private chamber aboard the Obsidian Spear, the newest flagship of the Dominion fleet. His mind replayed every detail from the human attack. The Zelthar were masters of war, trained to anticipate every possible move, yet these humans had been unpredictable at every turn. "They are reckless," one of his officers said, leaning over the tactical display. "No," Var replied, his voice calm but heavy with concern. "They are not reckless. They are dangerous. They learn too quickly and they do not fear death. That is why we failed." The High Council of the Dominion met in emergency sessions. Plans for another lesson were delayed. Elders argued about what these humans really were. Some still believed the humans were a fleeting anomaly, but Var had begun to see the truth. They were far more than a primitive species. They were resilient, adaptable, and fearless. "It is not just about numbers," Var said to the council. "They fight with something we do not understand. Heart, purpose, unity. They may be young, but they are not to be underestimated." Even the council, known for their centuries of arrogance, felt unease. The humans had begun to turn the tide, not through overwhelming firepower, but through determination, strategy, and the will to survive. The Terran Coalition grows stronger. Back in the Terran Coalition, Earth and its colonies had transformed. Every day, human engineers and scientists learned more about Dominion technology. Ships were rebuilt faster, weapons were improved, and shields became stronger. Every defeat or setback from the Dominion attack was now studied and turned into knowledge. Admiral Ward stood on the command deck of the TNS Valiant, observing the latest fleet drill. Pilots moved their ships with precision, practicing coordinated maneuvers that would have seemed impossible just a year ago. Captain Mira Solis approached, pointing to a simulation on the holographic map. "The Dominion is preparing for a larger offensive," she said. "Their scouts report movement near the Orion Gate. We may face more ships soon." Elias nodded. "Then we will be ready. Every human ship here is not just a tool of war. They carry our spirit. That is something the Dominion cannot calculate." He looked at the assembled crew. Engineers, pilots, and officers alike. All were working not for glory or conquest, but for their home, their families, and the memory of those lost at Vos Prime. The Zelthar underestimate. No more. The Dominion sent a massive fleet to investigate. Thousands of ships moved in formation, sleek and deadly. Vos Prime had been a lesson, one they intended not to repeat. Yet despite their preparation, the humans were already ready. Admiral Ward had anticipated their movements. The Terran fleet had grown not just in size but in tactics. They were no longer reacting. They were setting traps. Mines were placed in asteroid belts. Small squads waited in hidden orbits ready to strike at vulnerable points. When the Dominion fleet entered the sector near the Orion Gate, they found themselves suddenly under attack from all sides. Small Terran craft darted between asteroids, hitting supply ships, then disappearing into the void. Larger human warships attacked from unexpected angles, avoiding the brunt of the Dominion's massive weapons. The Dominion were frustrated. Every attack they expected failed. Every strategy was countered. The humans were learning faster than any species had before. Var watched from the bridge of his flagship, his hands tight on the railing. "They are not just defending," he admitted quietly. "They are leading. They are teaching us how to fight against ourselves." Human strategy and courage. The turning point came during a large skirmish near the system of Typhon Minor. The Dominion's fleet, confident in its superiority, formed a massive battle line. They believed the humans would retreat or scatter under pressure. Instead, the Terran fleet split into smaller groups, attacking simultaneously from multiple directions. They used human-engineered drones enhanced with Dominion tech to confuse sensors and create false targets. Dominion cruisers fired at empty space while human ships struck at their weakest points. In one daring move, a squadron of human pilots led by Lieutenant Aaron Vega executed what became known as the Vega Maneuver. They charged directly into the middle of the Dominion formation, not to destroy but to distract. At the exact moment, human engineers remotely activated charges in Dominion supply stations, causing explosions that crippled the fleet. The Dominion were stunned. Ships scattered. Commanders panicked. For the first time, they were truly fighting for survival, not dominance. The message of humanity. As the skirmish ended, Admiral Ward sent a transmission across Dominion-controlled space. It was calm, precise, and deliberate. "We do not fight for conquest. We fight for life, for memory, and for those who cannot defend themselves. You call it strategy. We call it duty. You call it war. We call it justice." Every human pilot and crew member felt the weight of that message. It was not just a declaration. It was a promise. Allies began to notice. Other species across the galaxy took notice. Worlds that had previously bowed quietly under Dominion control began to whisper about humans. Traders, scholars, and explorers shared stories of the Terran fleet's speed, creativity, and courage. Some aliens began to offer secret support, intelligence, resources, or safe passages, inspired by the humans' determination and integrity. For humanity, this was not conquest. It was proof that unity and courage could inspire others. The galaxy began to see humans not as a young, chaotic species, but as guardians of hope and freedom. The Dominion scrambles. The High Council of the Dominion grew anxious. Every report highlighted a troubling fact. Humans did not fight like others. They adapted, learned, and sometimes acted in ways the Dominion could not predict. No matter how many ships they deployed, humans continued to find ways to overcome challenges. Var briefed his fleet again. "Prepare for anything. Expect the unexpected. But know this, they do not fear us. That is their strength, and we must respect it." The Council's advisors were skeptical, but Var insisted. "If we ignore this, if we dismiss them as primitive, we will lose not just this battle, but the future." The human spirit, back on Earth and its colonies, the people knew the Dominion would not stop. But instead of fear, their hearts were filled with determination. Humanity had learned to turn loss into strength. Every destroyed ship, every fallen comrade became a lesson. Every victory was a symbol of resilience. Young pilots trained tirelessly, engineers built faster, and leaders coordinated with precision. Even ordinary citizens contributed, in factories, communication centers, and research labs. Every hand, every mind, every effort counted. Admiral Ward addressed his fleet before another operation. His voice was steady, filled with calm authority. "The Dominion has power. They have experience. They have weapons. But they do not have what we have: our courage, our unity, and our resolve. Today we show them the meaning of human strength." The fleet responded in unison. "For the fallen." And as human ships rose into the void, leaving the safety of their planets behind, the galaxy watched. The small united species from Earth was no longer defenseless. It was a force to be reckoned with. The turning tide by the end of the year, the Dominion's confidence had begun to waver. Reports of human victories spread like wildfire. Worlds under Dominion control whispered in secret about rebellion. Even within Dominion ranks, some began to question whether their empire could survive this unpredictable species. Humans had not sought to destroy or conquer. They fought to protect, to remember, and to uphold justice. And in doing so, they had done what no one had expected. They had begun to turn the tide of the war. Commander Var, standing alone on his flagship bridge, stared at the stars. The humans were no longer the fledgling species he had attacked months ago. They were united, brave, and relentless. For the first time in his career, Var felt the weight of true challenge. The galaxy had seen the start of Retribution, and the humans were only just beginning. Years had passed since the first Zelthar attack on Earth. The galaxy had changed and humanity had grown. What began as a single devastating assault had transformed into a story of courage, unity, and purpose. Humans were no longer seen as a fragile species to be dismissed. They were respected, feared, and admired. The Terran coalition had expanded its fleet, strengthened its defenses, and perfected strategies that no other species could anticipate. But the humans' greatest weapon was not in their ships or weapons. It was their spirit, the courage to protect, the drive to rebuild, and the determination to fight for justice. The final campaign, the Dominion, humiliated by repeated human victories, had finally mobilized its greatest fleet. Thousands of ships, battle cruisers, and fighters moved through the stars, determined to crush humanity once and for all. Commander Var led the fleet personally, his pride wounded and his patience worn thin. The Dominion's generals insisted on total domination. "We will show them the meaning of power," they said. Yet Var hesitated. The humans were different now, and stronger, wiser, and more united than ever. He could feel it in every report, every transmission, every piece of intelligence he intercepted. They fought not for conquest, but for principle, and that was something the Dominion could not predict. Human Strategy Admiral Elias Ward prepared the Terran fleet for the decisive encounter. Thousands of officers, engineers, and pilots worked in perfect coordination. Every plan, every movement had been practiced and perfected over years of anticipation. Ward addressed his officers before the engagement. "They believe they can overwhelm us with numbers and firepower," he said. "We will show them that unity, courage, and determination are stronger than size and arrogance. Today we fight not for revenge, but for all who cannot fight for themselves." The fleet echoed his words, a chorus of determination. For the fallen, the humans' plan relied on precise timing, coordinated strikes, and calculated risks. They used asteroid fields to hide their approach, deployed drones to confuse the Dominion sensors, and struck key targets with surgical precision. Every movement was deliberate, every strike purposeful. Even the smallest human ship played a critical role. Pilots executed daring maneuvers that would have seemed impossible a year ago. Engineers remotely activated devices to disable Dominion weapons. Scientists coordinated electronic warfare to disrupt enemy communications. It was a display of intelligence, courage, and unity, the true power of humanity. The battle begins. When the Dominion fleet entered the human-controlled sector, they expected an easy victory. The Terran fleet was smaller and younger, they assumed. They underestimated the humans, and that would be their mistake. The first wave of attacks began. Human ships darted between asteroids, striking from angles the Dominion had never considered. Larger human vessels deployed shields and countermeasures that rendered Dominion cannons nearly useless. Var's fleet struggled to respond. Every strategy they had mastered over centuries was being countered. Every formation was disrupted. Human tactics were fast, unpredictable, and relentless. A squadron led by Lieutenant Aaron Vega executed a maneuver that became legendary. Their ships flew directly between the Dominion's main cruisers, dodging fire with skill and precision, while simultaneously planting charges on supply vessels. Explosions lit the dark void of space, breaking the enemy's formation. Var could only watch in disbelief. "How can they do this?" he muttered. "They should not have this skill. They should not be able to match us." But the humans did. The turning point hours into the battle, the Dominion fleet was in disarray. Communications were jammed, cruisers were damaged, and morale was sinking. The humans did not pursue destruction recklessly. Instead, They struck at the essential points: supply lines, engines, and command ships, crippling the Dominion without unnecessary loss of life. Admiral Ward broadcast a message to the Dominion commanders. His voice was calm and steady, carrying across space. You called it a routine skirmish. We called it Retribution. We do not seek to destroy your species. We fight to protect, to remember, and to restore balance. Your arrogance brought this war. Now you will see the strength of unity, courage, and justice. The message spread throughout the Dominion fleet. Even their soldiers began to hesitate. For the first time, they realized the humans were not just survivors. They were a force that could not be ignored. The final victory. By the end of the engagement, the Dominion had no choice but to retreat. Their fleet was battered, their strategy broken, and their confidence shattered. Humanity had achieved what no other young species had ever accomplished. They had stood against an ancient empire and emerged victorious. On Earth and its colonies, celebrations were muted but full of pride. Every ship, every pilot, and every person who had contributed felt the weight of the victory. It was not conquest that mattered, but survival, honor, and the protection of life. Var, now a captive of circumstance, finally acknowledged the truth. He stood on his flagship's bridge, staring at the retreating human fleet. They were right, he said quietly. They are not just humans, they are a lesson we must never forget. The Treaty of Solon, the months that followed, the Dominion signed the Treaty of Sol, surrendering unconditionally. It was a historic moment, marking not just the end of war, but the recognition of humanity as a major power in the galaxy. Humans did not seek revenge or domination. Instead, they offered peace to all who had suffered under the Dominion. Colonies that had been oppressed were freed. Worlds once under strict control now welcomed humans as protectors and allies. Admiral Ward addressed the galaxy via a transmission that reached every inhabited star system. We fought not for ourselves alone. We fought for every being who could not defend themselves. Let this be a lesson. Power is not in numbers or technology alone. True strength comes from unity, courage, and the will to protect life. This is the way of humanity. A changed galaxy. The galaxy began to remember the events differently. Historians would later call the conflict the human retribution. Textbooks in multiple species academies recorded the rise of humanity, not as conquerors, but as defenders. Even the children of the galaxy were taught the story. It was not about fear or hate, but about courage and responsibility. Var, now older and quieter, visited Earth as part of a peace delegation. He walked through the memorial gardens built for the fallen, human and alien alike. He observed the statues, the inscriptions, and the faces of children playing among the trees. A young girl approached him and handed him a flower. "We don't hate you anymore," she said softly. "But we don't forget," Var bowed his head. He had seen many things in his life, but nothing had humbled him like humanity. Their courage, their unity, and their ability to forgive while remembering had changed the galaxy forever. The lasting lesson in the years after the war, humans continued to explore, build, and unite the galaxy. Their fleets were strong, but they did not dominate. They offered protection to those in need. They taught the value of cooperation and empathy. The Dominion recovered slowly, but they never forgot the lesson. Humanity had shown that no empire, no matter how ancient or powerful, could ignore the strength of unity, courage, and purpose. In human schools, children learned the story of the first attack, the counterstrike at Vos Prime, and the final victory that led to the Treaty of Sol. Every textbook began with the same line. We called it a routine skirmish. They called it retribution. Across the stars, humans were no longer underestimated. Every empire, every species, every observer remembered that humanity may forgive, but it never forgets. And when threatened, it does not just defend, it rises, united, fearless, and relentless. Admiral Ward, now retired, watched young pilots train aboard the newest Terran fleet ships. He smiled quietly. Humanity had faced the storm and survived. More than that, they had inspired the galaxy. The lesson of retribution had been taught. The galaxy had learned what it truly meant to face humanity, and for the humans themselves. The message was clear: courage, unity, and purpose are the greatest weapons any species can wield. The stars would never forget.